Hey Raj.
Hello, Elena. Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining today's conversation. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Let me just do one thing. I think that I need to, um, yeah, change a little bit of a setting in the recording. I think this is good. All right. Yeah. So let's restart. You can start with the hi again if you want.
Okay. Hi Raj, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Elena. How are you?
Me too, doing really fine. Just celebrated my birthday, so I'm really happy.
All right.
Yeah.
Very
So
happy birthday to you.
thank you. Thank you for joining our conversation today. And I hope you will enjoy the questions that we're going to discuss. So would you like to jump into the questions right away?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I'm really interested in asking you some things because they're related also to what I study. I study psychology and learning sciences in Germany right now. And so your answers are somehow, I think will somehow help me also in my own ideas about these questions. So let's just begin and talk about a little bit about your experience here. And you've been in the field of happiness for a long time. So I wonder if your views today, things that you think about happiness, about well-being, if they changed in comparison with when you just got involved in the field. Okay, you've got many TED Talks, you wrote a book, you have very successful MOOC courses, and plus years of experience. Has there been any changes about happiness for you over these years?
Great question, Elena. It's a very deep question. My perspectives on happiness have continued to change over time, not in a very big way. I do think that there are some things that I started with that still hold. For example, that happiness is an important goal and that everybody should have the right to pursue that goal. One of the changes that happened soon after I started teaching the class was that I learned that happiness is not just a feel-good goal, but it's also very functional. Happier people are more productive, healthy, etc. But that happened a while ago. I think a recent change, I would say, is actually somewhat of a negative change in a sense, which is that I've discovered over time, just working with a lot of people and corporations, etc., that improving happiness levels is very tough. Is very tough. Okay, I mean, I do have to acknowledge that. And the reason for that is that it is not something that externally somebody else can do for you. You have to be very motivated to change your happiness levels yourself. And so if somebody else notices that you have thought patterns that are negative, for example, you tend to be a complainer, right? Or you tend to be an other-oriented perfectionist where you want other people to be exactly like how you want them to be, etc. And you notice these patterns in other people and you know that it's really affecting their happiness levels, but you wanting them, I suppose you're being an other-oriented perfectionist now, but one wanting them to change in their thought patterns so that they can be happier, right? And you might really care for them. They might be your children or your spouse or your parents or your friend, really want change them. Okay, and in a sense, I suppose this shouldn't be surprising because I think that a lot of goals that we set ourselves to achieve, you're starting this program. In order for you to be successful in it and get good grades, you have to work hard. Nobody else can do it for you, right? And I don't think that happiness is any different in that sense. It's just that the realization is sunk in that it's so important that people take ownership and responsibility for their own happiness. And the other thing that makes it also a tough goal to achieve is that that motivation alone is not enough, right? Then you have to have diligence and you have to really put into practice. And it's not something that is externally observable, like a grade in a course. I mean, you can see other people grading you and you can see what's the right answer, wrong answer. Happiness is an inside state, right? I mean, nobody else can really, honestly tell exactly how happy you are. And so you have to kind of monitor it. And, so other people may not even notice that you're not being diligent. For example, if you have to maintain a 3 good things journal every day and you don't do it, it's not going to obviously improve your happiness if you don't do it. So, that diligence becomes super important. So if you combine the motivation and the diligence part of it, it just becomes too high a bar for a lot of people, I feel. So that's one kind of a learning. The other big thing is that I've learned that there is just such a huge amount of interest around the world, and I keep getting this every year from a dozen people, I would say, for somebody really. I mean, they're asking me to do it because they know me and they know I have a course and a book and all that, but they want somebody to tackle the topic of teenager happiness, or unhappiness of teenagers. So that's been a big learning for me, that that's such a huge topic and an important topic.
Yeah, so that might be a future field of your work.
Yeah, possible. Other people are working on it, I know it, and so I do think that there's some good things coming up on that topic.
Excellent. Thank you. That's interesting. Yeah, I think we're going to come back a little bit to what you said about taking responsibility for your happiness in one of the further questions that I'm going to ask you later. But for now, I think that most of us have some life principles in order to maintain certain happiness levels. Try to maybe notice good things around you, feeling grateful for things that surround you, for things that you have. So I wonder if you have any life principles that help you maintain your happiness level, and also maybe the ones that you share with your children for them, to teach them to live a happier life.
Yeah, again, a very great question. Conceptually, I think that every parent in the world would agree with the statement that all we ultimately want as parents is for our children to be happy. Okay, and I don't think that any parent would really disagree with that a lot. But then it's in the execution of that principle or that goal that we come into problems. And Elena, when you have children of your own, I suppose you will also realize this. But what happens?
I'll ask you for advice.
Huh? Sorry?
I'll ask you for advice, definitely.
Yeah. So what happens is that we often get caught up in social comparisons ourselves as parents, and our worries about whether, if, let's say that, my son wants to pursue music. Okay. And it's not even such a unusual thing for a child to want, right? Pursuing something like music or sports. But we were very aware that, very few people actually make it big. And even to kind of be able to lead a pretty decent life, right? Not a spectacular life, just a decent life. It is not at all guaranteed if you pursue something like music or sports, because the pyramid is very narrow and tall, right? I mean, only the very top people are able to kind of, fend for themselves and pay their bills. So on the one hand, we want them to be happy, and maybe we recognize that, pursuing music is going to make them happy, or pursuing sports is going to make them happy. But on the other hand, we also worry that if we push them down that path, are we sacrificing their ability to be able to subsist, and be able to pay the bills? And so I suppose at one level, we're worried about their future happiness when we talk about it. And so that's one thing that is dawned on me a little bit, that, it's okay to have this principle that we want our children to be happy. But then in the execution of that principle, I think that sometimes we get into a little bit of a quagmire. We get stuck in this quicksand of, what does it really mean? Does it mean that if they like something and they're passionate about it, we say, okay, go for it, right? Even if we are aware that it's going to be very, very difficult in that field because very few people succeed. On balance, I do think that that is the right approach. I do think that one should give them all the support that they need, motivate them, and so on. And this is not necessarily for everybody, but from my perspective, with my kind of life circumstances, I feel like if I with the access to resources that I have, etc., do not encourage my children to do the thing that makes them happy, and I start worrying about survival and things like that, then really there's no hope for many other people. Okay. And so if I start pushing my child into doing something that the child does not want to do, let's say engineering, because I happen to think that that's where, some money is, and then, I'm really kind of not being faithful to this advice that I'm giving to everybody. I'm being a bit of a hypocrite. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's been an interesting learning actually about myself and about my children and about how to kind of be faithful or consistent with the general principle of maximizing happiness and prioritizing happiness, because my son is 17 and he's about to apply to colleges, and so this is really coming home now, so that's one of the things. And it's slightly different from, I think, what your question was, what is a life principle, or what do I tell children, etc. But it's kind of connected to that topic. I do think that this life principle, again, is not a big surprise. It is to prioritize happiness, but I was just trying to kind of draw out some of the nuances of this execution of that life principle when it comes to your own children. And the broad principle, again, just to summarize, is that I don't think there is a very clear answer that is going to be applicable to everybody in every situation. I think people have to assess on a case-by-case basis where they stand in financially, for example, in their life. But for somebody like me, I feel pretty secure that even if they weren't to earn a lot of money, let's say they become a poor musician, right? That's almost like a term that people use, a poor musician. I think that they still won't be suffering for lack of food or a roof over their head, because I believe that I have enough access to resources to set it up for them. And so for me, at least, it feels like I should encourage them and I should tell them to do what it is that they want to do.
And maybe make their own mistakes, right? Become a good musician and then maybe becoming somebody else if that doesn't work.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing, is that you bring up a good point. I don't think that it is the case that when you think, somebody wants to pursue music, we imagine somebody playing the guitar on a band on a stage or something like that. But the industry is so big, right? Exactly. I mean, there are music critics, there are people who compose but do not play. There
producers.
Sorry?
Producers as well.
Producers, yeah, and people who do research on music and so on and so forth. So it's a very big field, and if somebody's smart, then they'll find their own niche, even within that seemingly very narrow pyramid field. They'll still find something to do that will help them not just be decently successful, but perhaps even very successful.
Yes, I think this is also there's part of a generation problem, here, because different generations also view things in different ways, and I feel like that's also part of the issue, because before people didn't even think about what they really want. Now the kids are encouraged to think about what they want, and that's new, I feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I would like to talk a little bit about the context in which we are all living right now. The news that we hear on TV that make many people all over the world feel anxious, feel scared, feel worried. And unfortunately, that doesn't let them sometimes work, concentrate on their studies or whatever they need to do. And they might be in their houses, all over the world in different countries, but they're still feeling this state of anxiety and fear. And so what would be your advice for people who feel that way and just can't help watching the news and feeling worried about the people who suffer?
Okay, so again, an excellent question, a very important question. In general, the answer is something that maybe most people know already, right? Which is that if you can control and regulate what it is that you pay attention to, then you can control and regulate how you feel, because our emotions are ultimately largely driven by what goes on between our two ears, right? I mean, what we think about, what we pay attention to, etc. And so conceptually, the answer is very simple. Of course, just because it's simple, it doesn't mean that it's easy to do. But the answer is to not pay attention to those things that are not productive right now. Not to kind of be delusional and run away from those things because you don't want to feel bad. But in the moment, if, say, for example, looking at the news is not going to put you in a good mood, and it's going to make you feel diffident about life and suck out all the energy that you have to do the things you have to do from your life, then right now the correct thing to do, appropriate thing to do, is to not pay attention to that thing, to the news. And more importantly, the general principle is not pay attention to things inside your own mind. That is, have the ability to control your own mind. So if you think about your mind as being a flashlight, right, that can shine its light on anything, right? And you're inside this room, which is your mind. And there are some things that are good and make you feel good and make you feel productive and energetic and confident and optimistic and hopeful, and other things that make you feel the opposite. Then if you have the control over that flashlight, you can shine that flashlight on the things that you want to shine it on, right? So that's the idea, is to gain control over that flashlight. And that is what my meditation or mindfulness practice allows you to do. You know, it's a large part of what the practice is the ability to gain control over that flashlight. And so that's really the answer. It's a answer that doesn't work in the short run, because if you don't have the expertise, it's like saying to somebody, you know, if you want to go faster from place A to place B, then bicycle rather than walk, right? But if they don't know how to ride a bicycle, how are they going to do it? So you have to start practicing that. But I think that as you're practicing it, and I definitely advise or suggest people to take up mindfulness and meditation, but even as you're doing it, there are some things that you can do along the lines of shaping your environment, shaping your external environment. So, you know, not watching the news. And if it's difficult to not watch the news, if you're at home because the TV is right there and you're tempted, then go out for a walk, right? Just expel yourself from the house, right? And go out for a walk, or talk to friends who are not into the news, or play with a dog or a child, things like that, or watch something else altogether, you know, maybe watch a movie, etc. So that is one answer to this. And I do think that it's a very powerful answer. The other answer is to kind of take action, you know. So what I mean by that is that if something is troubling you, let's say, for example, let's take the crisis in Ukraine right now, right? If that is troubling you, and let's say that you really feel bad for these innocent people who are caught in the crossfire and are getting killed, right? Then maybe there's some action that you can take, right? Maybe you can donate some money or donate some time or effort in order to help those people in some way or the other, you know, and then, of course, many different ways in which you can do it. So that's the other thing. Rather than kind of marinate in the negativity and feeling helpless, you actually take some action, okay? And it could be very simple action. For example, you could even learn about the history of the whole place, okay, so that you get a better understanding of why it is that this is happening, right? And that will allow you in turn to kind of feel compassionate toward really all the sides. You know, it's not like the Russians are not suffering. I mean, they're suffering too. It's kind of difficult to empathize with that position right now, but just understand the historical events that have shaped this particular outcome, and to gain a sense of compassion for everybody. Nobody is the enemy ultimately, you know. I mean, in this perspective, everyone's deserving of compassion. And so gaining that perspective might help you kind of with your negative emotions a little bit, and maybe make you more prone to acting in a productive fashion. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on this.
Thank you. And I felt like the first the first advice you gave about flashlight, you know, it's connected with taking responsibility for your happiness. So it's not so easy when your attention is caught by other things, right? And attention sometimes is something we cannot control, and that's how commercials work. They catch your attention before you even realize that they have your attention, right? So I think it's not easy. And would you support this position when some people say we are what we eat, we are what we consume in terms of information as well? So they just prefer to cut off completely from the news, that negative news, or people who spread that kind of news. Do you support this position?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is some merit to that approach. Once you understand that what you're exposed to shapes what you think, right? What you're exposed to is literally what you're paying attention to, and it shapes what you think, and therefore how you feel. And if it's important for you to feel positive or you know, in a productive mood, and sometimes it could be not necessarily positive, just more energized, or maybe even a little bit nervous about something, because that gives you energy to do the thing, then, you know, you have to do that. You know, you have to control what you consume. Now, if you take it to the extreme, you might have a situation in which people are like the proverbial ostrich with the head stuck in the sand, right? I mean, they're ignoring information or stimuli that are actually important for them, and being like that ostrich might not be the best thing to do, given what's going on around you. You might need to pay attention to it. So there's a little bit of a, fine balance, I suppose. And it really boils down to a case by case basis. But one thing that I'll say that I've discovered over time is that in general, I think people err on the side of not realizing the negative effects of exposure to stimuli on their feelings. And so they err on the side of exposing themselves to stimuli or news or people, books, movies, etc., that are counterproductive, that are putting them in a bad mood. And so I think that in general, I think that the proportion of people who actually avoid these things so that they can maintain a positive state is a minority. I think the proportion of people who maybe mistakenly think at some level that, look, I mean, it's in use, I need to be informed, therefore I'm going to look at it, and they don't even realize that they're addicted. And then they end up feeling bad, and they don't connect the dots and realize that it's because of their exposure to the news that they're feeling bad. They start to kind of become a victim and complain about the state of the affairs in the world, and the world is going to the dogs and so on and so forth. I think that set of people is larger. And so in general, I would say that this idea that, you can kind of become delusional by avoiding all of these things is conceptually true, but I haven't seen a lot of cases of those kind of people personally.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the effect of this information that we did not even realize, and especially in the beginning of the day when we check our phone, we might just consume all that negativity before we even start our day, and then we wonder why the day has not started the way we maybe wanted. Right?
Yeah, and that has a ripple effect, right? You're in a sour mood, and then maybe when you're taking your metro to your office, you're everybody can see that you have this dour face and you're scowling, and they then kind of reflect that onto you, and then before you know it, it's just gone downhill a little bit. So it can be a bit of a vicious cycle, and it can be a virtuous cycle too. I mean, if you kind of expose yourself to positive things, for example, as soon as you wake up, this is something that I've been doing for a while. I just think of 2 or 3 things that are exciting things coming up for the day. Like, for example, this interview with Elena, and then it just puts me in a positive mood, and then it goes a little bit uphill from there. It's not a huge difference. It's not going to, of course, there are bigger things that shape the overall mood for the day, but this does help a little bit, maybe 10% or something.
Yeah, those together with long-term goals work well, right? And I just could see your dog right there, and I can see that's one of the sources of your happiness.
Oh, yeah, he's like a COVID pandemic adoption, and he's been awesome. Apollo is his name. Apollo, say hi.
Oh.
Say hi, Apollo.
Hello, Apollo. Okay, and so the last question, Raj, is I want to connect it with the topic, which is Reconnect. So what do you think? Is the world getting better, or is the world getting worse?
That's a great question. I don't think there's a right answer to it. It, I think, depends on your perspective. And I think that in general, we're at a fork, it feels like. And I think maybe throughout history, everybody's felt this way. But I feel like right now, we're at a fork where there's great promise because of technology and all that, but there's also great peril. Again, because
do you think people will be more connected with each other and with themselves internally in the future?
I frankly think that there is going to be a kind of a greater variance on that dimension. So there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to be even more interconnected with themselves and with people who matter. And then there's going to be a bunch of people who are even less connected. And both of those are going to happen because of technology, or it's going to be accelerated because of technology. And so, I think we're living in very interesting times.
Okay.
Elena, I think we should stop now because it's
Yeah.
9 and I have the other meeting coming up.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much for this answer, for this last answer, and for the interview in general. It was really nice talking to you.
Yeah,
Bye.
same here, Elena. Take care, okay? And you'll see the recording at some point. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
All right, I got to really rush. Bye now. Take care, okay? Bye.
Okay, have a good trip.